Today I just wanted to show you how acrylics can be used to paint in stamps in the same way that watercolours can. It doesn't have to look very, well, acrylic-y if you like. What I'm going to do is take some water and just damp down one of these petals in the same way that I would if I was using watercolour, and I'm just going to dip my brush into some dilute acrylic paint, and you can see that that does kind of flow. I'm going to go into a little bit of blue and put the blue in like that. Now it won't necessarily flow in exactly the same way as watercolours will, but you can still get some very pretty effects. And how much it flows depends on how wet the paint is, how much pigment you have in relation to the amount of water. And if you've got a lot of water in it and relatively little pigment, it will act very similarly to a normal watercolour. The difference will be that when this is dried, you can't then apply different effects. Like in watercolour, you can, I'm going to do this on a dry petal so you can see the difference. With watercolour, when you have finished painting, you can still pick paint off of the paper. That's the technique which is often used when you do a watercolour background. You splash water on it and then pick up the paint with tissue afterwards. And with this, you can't do it. Once it is dry, it is dry. It's not going to be going anywhere. But you can still, as you can see, get the very soft effect that watercolours are known for. So, as well as being able to do blended backgrounds with these, I've just done a video on using acrylics in the same way that you'd use distress inks for that. You can use them to paint in the same way as watercolour and give a very nice, pretty, soft finish, if that, of course, is what you are after. Now, the next petal I'm going to do, what I'm going to do is give it a blue base and let that dry considerably before I apply anything else, and you can see what that effect does. But wet on wet is very similar to a watercolour finish. I'm going to do the other one, I think, in a pink. There we are. Now a small set, or a set of small tubes of acrylic colour. I've got a set of 24 here, cost me €2 or €3 from a Chinese shop. These are cheap and cheerful, but I actually really like them because they are already soft. Some acrylic paints, and indeed watercolours I've bought, have been very, very firm out of the tube, and that makes them very difficult to activate. So that is pretty much dry, so I'm going to go in now with a thicker mix of the pink. And you can see that this isn't spreading in the same way at all because the paint is much drier. So you can add a fair amount of detail. This one I'm putting some very wet paint on, and you can see the effect of that on to a relatively dry surface. I'm enjoying myself doing this, so I think I might do some more. Why not? I like to alternate methods on different things, and sometimes that can give you a really fun effect. I'm using a relatively dry paint at the moment. I'm going to put the blue over the top of that, whereas that one was done wet in wet. And I'm using quite a heavy amount of pigment doing this particular bit, I've mixed the pink and the blue onto the tile there. Now if you really want to go thick, you can actually create texture with the acrylic paints, which is something you can't do with watercolour, but you can with acrylic. You could literally put this on here in lumps, and in time, you know, it would dry. So you've got very, very heavy paint there, very thick paint, so you can see the difference. In fact, what I'll do is I'll go into the pink and use lots and lots of paint. See, a full brush here, and come in and do this one. There is actually a method that you can use for painting flowers freehand, not filling in, but painting flowers freehand, that with acrylic paints you can actually pick up two colours on the brush. It's called one-stroke painting. You can do that as well. Not something I've ever really got into a great deal. I've done a little bit of it, but not a vast amount. But you can. And this particular paint is now very dry. There's very little water in the brush, and it's only just about enough water in there to make the paint spread at all. It's quite dry. Okay. Now if I come in with a much wetter paint, dry my brush off a little bit, take some of the water out of there, a bit too much water. So then I've still got some shading on there. But if I just apply water to, say, this one, which is almost dry, but not quite, and if I get something which is dry enough to soak up the water, I can just about, at the moment, I can just about take some colour out. But that is only really because I was using such a lot of pigment in the first place that there is still pigment on the top of there that will be able to be removed. Once it's completely dry, you can't reactivate it, so that is the main difference. I actually quite like this. It's fun. And it's quite pretty. So now I'm back to my wet. I think I might use this on a card actually. This was going to be just scrap. It looks too pretty to be scrap. So I think I might just do some very casual painting in this one and just leave some white spots as well. Add some pink in places. There we go, quite like that. And I've just about got enough paint left on my tile, I think, to do one more flower. A lot of people, when they're painting, try to use too small a brush, and that doesn't really help you. I try to use the largest brush I can use and still fit it into the shapes that I want to colour. And this one's going to end up a mishmash of everything that's left on the palette. but you can still get, as you can see, the layer upon layer look, an almost translucent look, even though this is acrylic paint and not watercolour. There we go. I'm quite happy with that.